And then, of course, how could I not mention AI? So certainly there's AI use in ESG investment analysis. And then there are lots of ethical questions around that technology use, which bleeds into the S in ESG.
Welcome to The Greener Way. I'm your host, Rose Mary Petrass, Senior Journalist at FS Sustainability. We are recording on Gadigal land. We pay our respects to traditional custodians of country and elders past, present and emerging. This week we have Rob Langrick, Chief Product Advocate of CFA Institute. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Rob, CFA Institute is a financial education organisation. So what kind of trends are you seeing in sustainability finance education at the moment?
Well, the growth continues and it's really shifting eastwards, I would say. We're having a surprising boom in China. And so that's now our biggest market for sustainable finance education. And that's really driven by the government's push for the new three industries there. So batteries, clean tech, and electric vehicles. And so, for example, in China, more than half of cars sold now are electric. And probably the biggest driver in China is the new stock exchange regulation, the CSRC, which is mandating disclosures from companies. We're also seeing a surprising boom in the Middle East. So Saudi Arabia has what's called the Saudi Green Initiative linked to Vision 2030. And that's really underpinned by the fact that Saudi Arabia is going to have the cheapest unit solar and wind energy of any country in the world. So not only the cheapest oil, but also the cheapest clean technology and also some good geothermal. So that's a surprising boom for us as well. I would say there's also increased interest in biodiversity. And so I think you're going to start seeing more and more learning products focused on that topic as well.
Tell us about the so-called ESG backlash in the USA. What's behind that?
Well, a couple of things to note. I travel a lot. So this year I've been to both China and India. And I will say there's a complete absence of cynicism about ESG in both of those markets. And even here in the USA, there is continued interest in sustainability. So it really is focused on the ESG branding, I would say. And when we kind of unpack that, there's not much of a focus on the G. While there is some undeveloped governance around climate, really its focus is on the E and the S, the controversy. Now, last week I was down in Texas at a conference. I was speaking to some locals there about the backlash. And you have to recognize that there are some states in America, Texas being one of them, they're net oil and gas exporters. And here in America, the wealth from energy is pretty widely held, unlike, say, in Saudi Arabia. And this definitely does create a financial incentive to downplay climate matters. But I think more substantively, I think there's an awareness that really since 2015, the Paris Accords, it's become clear the transition is going to be a little bit harder than we thought. And so it really kind of does boil down a bit to economics. I'd say a big trend here in America is what we call green hushing, when companies will actually take action on climate, but not want to talk about it too freely. So, for example, you cannot buy waterfront insurance in the state of Florida. Yet at the same time, companies are not really keen to talk much about climate matters, even though they are kind of taking action and the per capita emissions are falling most rapidly here in the USA. So it's really kind of a political thing, I would say. On the S, by the way, we are in an election year here in America. The election is just weeks away. And clearly there are differing opinions on social matters. And the perception here in the USA, whether rightly or wrongly, is that the S in ESG hews pretty closely to left-wing views. And so it's become a little bit of a political football, I would say. I think the big moment in this that really turned the debate was probably Ukraine, where really before that you had this kind of binary good, bad labels put on certain types of companies, in particular the defense manufacturers. And I think that a few years ago, that certainly got the debate going, where people started to question the whole edifice here in the USA.
What are employers demanding in sustainability education today?
Well, we have a process called practice analysis where we actually go and ask exactly that question to employers. What do you want your juniors to know about sustainability to put into practice in the field? And so when we look at annual curriculum updates for our certificate in ESG investing, we have a prism to actually directly answer that question. So the new things that employers are demanding, They are expecting employees to know about the ISSB standards, the key aims and framework there. Carbon pricing is going from strength to strength, trying to internalize the cost of climate change. Transition pathways getting more smart in terms of the different directions that could take. People are now looking at government saying, you know what, we have green bonds on corporations. Let's have a look at the bonds of governments, the sovereign bonds. How can we analyze them in terms of climate and so on? ESG data sources is always a thorny one, given the fact that they tend to kind of be at odds with one another. And so really having a good understanding of the different ESG data sources is important. And then, of course, how could I not mention AI? So certainly there's AI use in ESG investment analysis. And then there are lots of ethical questions around that technology use, which bleeds into the S in ESG.
What does the future hold for sustainability education for finance professionals?
So when I was on my travels in India, I noticed that something similar was happening there that happened in 2021 in China. Notably, the stock exchange is now mandating disclosures from companies. And I really think that's foundational in terms of driving the growth of finance education in sustainability. And so I expect to see more and more of that around the world, the regulation tightening on different stock exchanges. And that's really the thing that's pushing the whole thing forwards. I do expect the label ESG to start to recede. It's certainly receding here in the USA, because really, when you think about it, ESG are just risk factors for investors, like any other risk factor. And given the fact that the brand has become a bit of a political football here in the USA, I expect the use of ESG to recede and sustainability to actually come more to the fore. I do expect the shift eastwards to continue. The boom in China is very real, kind of linked to the country's industrial strategy. And I expect a boom to begin in India and continue in the Middle East.
How is CFA Institute addressing these trends?
So we have a suite of products in the field. We've got 3 products. The largest ESG training program in the world, which is our certificate in ESG investing, has about 20,000 learners per year. And that's certainly our kind of core tool to build awareness and to drive knowledge in terms of investing with the ESG prism. We're then going deep into climate. So we have a climate risk valuation and investing certificate. This is for people who really want to go deep into the E. And we are finding a lot of interest among corporations to actually deep dive into decarbonization in particular, as they face the challenge to decarbonize their operation. But then at the basic level, we have a climate finance course, which is used for people who don't want to spend 100 hours learning about either ESG investing or climate. They just want a kind of a 10-hour taster. And we're finding that's quite useful for companies just finding their feet and getting their employees climate aware. So we're really using these 3 education products to really raise the level of education globally within the financial institutions and corporations of sustainability matters.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add today?
Well, today is Climate Week here in New York City, so I'm looking forward to going to various events there. I think there is a big movement happening globally. You can see it at the COP conferences every year. And I just encourage young professionals to get stuck in. I think it's a really important thing to be aware about things like climate science, but most important of all, and getting away from the debate around things like ESG, regulation is really the cutting edge of this trend. And so corporations are now being forced to disclose certain matters, and employees really have to learn these regulations because they're quite consequential financially to the corporations and institutions they work at. So really think about this trend in terms of a boom in tightening regulation, and all professionals really are going to have to get clued up about that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Rob. Where can people connect with you and find out about these sustainability finance education programs? What's your website?
So you can go to our website, www.cfainstitute.org. And in the top left-hand corner there, the programs tab, you'll see information about all the products I talked about, along with lots of research, advocacy, and standards on climate as well.
Until next time, then, I'm Rose Mary Petrass, and thank you for listening to The Greener Way.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability, a show about people, the planet, and investing in our collective future. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The Greener Way podcast gives listeners access to information and educational content provided by discussing numerous financial sustainable options and our featured guests. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of The Greener Way are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.